I have been really shocked with what is going on in Israel, which seems to be pushing these so-called vaccines more aggressively than any country on earth. So tell me about what's going on, Illana.
Yeah, so I agree with everything you're saying. The thing I think it's so important to understand is that what's happening here is it is very specifically happening in Israel because we're kind of the heart of what's so I'll get to that in a minute, but it is not specific to Israeli politics or Israel as the richness of the land and the things that you're talking about. That can't be sullied by what's happening.
Yeah.
But what is happening is since December, they have implemented, and again, there's no choice. They just decided unilaterally. They signed, our government under Benjamin Netanyahu signed a contract that we've only seen a redacted version of with Pfizer that literally sold his people to be the guinea pigs of the world. And everyone in the world knows that, except for us. So it's been a program that is done so crudely. I mean, just it's kind of impossible to draw the picture of literally just like you take a big fat crayon and just say that they just decided from one day to the next that everybody would be vaccinated. There's no informed consent. There is no risk-benefit analysis. There is absolutely zero understanding of the undertaking. And it's very deliberate, because were there any, then you wouldn't be able to get out these mass numbers. And we know there's a quota. There is a penalty clause. And they have numbers that they need to see filled, and they're going to make darn sure that that happens. And again, when I say crude, I mean, they're offering people pizza. Come and get a free slice of pizza if you get your shot. It's madness. And when I say that, and I have relatives in the States who have taken this injection with some more thought, they were given a stack of papers, you know, here's side effects to look out for. Here's a number to call. Here, you get your injection, you wait 15 minutes. Science is done. It's proven. Go on your way. And there is no data being collected.
Yeah.
So that's the shortest version.
Oh no, yeah. Illana, you've spelt it out very clearly there. And look, I mean, let's cut to the chase here. The Jewish people are kind of the last people on earth you would imagine that it's right for this kind of experimentation to be forced on. I mean, have we forgotten what happened in 1944, 45? I mean, my head's exploding.
It's mind blowing. Yeah, it's the thing is, it's like, you know, when I started off of this, do I think that specifically Pfizer pick this? I mean, there's logical reasons that Israel was chosen for this experimentation, because we're this little hermetically sealed environment. We have decades of perfectly meticulously recorded medical history that they can blame any side effects on. And you have our very ambitious prime minister who wants to be with the big boys. So there's a lot of reasons, but the personalness, again, it's so personal on levels spiritual and historical, that the Jewish people are chosen in their homeland. It cannot be a more personal, looking for the word in English, betrayal, you know. And you actually have people who survived the Holocaust, only to be injected experimentally in their homeland. This place is supposed to be our refuge.
Yeah.
And we're being attacked by our own people. You really, if you drew a picture, you couldn't have made it more meticulously painful.
Yes. Yeah. One of the acknowledged things about the vaccine, which is why I think not just the Pfizer one, but I think the AstraZeneca one as well, is that they are not recommended for pregnant women. And there have been miscarriages, not just pregnant women, but women considering getting pregnant. And yet here you are. Can they really be wanting to inject this stuff into the entire Israeli population, children as well, women of childbearing age? And
everyone has gotten it. Everyone. They have told children in schools down the road from me in Jerusalem, 16-year-old kids who have no ability to make a decision. That 16-year-old kids, you can't take your matriculation exams if you don't come with this injection in your body. It's absolute madness. What grandparent would want to risk their grandchildren's lives? It's just, the whole thing is so obvious. All of these, that getting to the answers is really quite linear. If you ask one question, it takes you on a very straight line to where we are today, seeing that the corruption, but the corruption that's much bigger than specifically Israel, that's very clearly by all of our leaders, yes. Most of the leaders worldwide have very clearly an agenda. And we know that what's happening here is the model. We know that, again, I want it to be clear that Israel and the Jewish people, I know that there's so much misunderstanding about what happens here in Israel and historically, but to understand that what's happening, that regardless of people's political understandings, that we've always been the canary in the coal mine. That's just the job that the Jewish people have always. We have this job to reflect to the world. And when there's rot with us, there's rot in the world. That's just how it goes. That's just how it goes historically. It's just what it is. So
that's interesting.
We know that the model, we will be used as the model very specifically. Again, whether it just happened because we had these great medical records, it is very specific that we are happening here. And we know, and my call to the world is saying, this is our chance to be human in a way that we have never had before. They're pushing past all our divisions, where we don't have to be left or right or religious or Muslim. We get to be humans. Yeah. We get to really connect and say, we are stronger than the few, these few up top who have their agendas. And if we can do that, it's tremendous. So and understanding that fighting for Israel, standing up is not, it is a fight for yourself. We know that here. We know that this battle that they must see through. They have to see this program succeed here, because we're going to be the model for the rest of the world. Yeah. And so the pressure for it to come in is greater than it's ever been. These entities that we're up against, the pharmaceutical, the government, the great reset type things, it's got to work here. So that's why we need this global recruit.
You mean in a way that you have to crush the Jews first, because for sort of symbolic purposes, and because, I sort of see that. But I mean, it does sound like a Nazi experiment. There's no way of getting around it. It's like the future of Jewish survival, reproduction and stuff. If you're injecting these, they're not vaccines, they're this experimental therapy into young Jewish, it horrifies me. I can't believe that I'm living in a time where such things could be possible. You must feel the same way.
It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing, because we all say never again. We all read 1984, we're so sure we'd be diligent. We're looking over here to be diligent should these things happen. And in the meantime, it's happening over here. And we're saying, but no, we've got to, because there's this virus, and what's even more painful is that people who we respect, who we love, our relatives, our neighbors, are validating these horrific things. We're this frog in the pot being boiled up and pretending it's not that hot yet. It's not that hot. They've got a reason, like trying to breathe above the water. It's madness. And the thing is, what woke me up at the very beginning was kind of like a shut up in bed type of thing that I realized at the beginning of this. I mean, for me, I've been in the vaccine safety world for a while, so it wasn't a surprise that this agenda was happening. But when it came on, and the way they there's no choice here. Other places in Europe and in America, it's kind of like, oh, would you please come and take this vaccine you really have to take? But here they're just like smack, choke, and if you don't get to work. You don't get to be healthy, law-abiding tax-paying citizens are not allowed into the museums that we support because we didn't
Whoa.
take an experimental injection that has no existing safety studies. We've lost our collective minds. We can't go to our choir groups we've been with for years. I just want to say that for me, the wake-up call was that this is what a Holocaust looks like in 2021. We don't do bang, bang, shoot it out anymore. This is it. This is for real.
Yeah.
This is what war looks like today.
Yeah.
It's the war of your mind and of your body. This is the last terrain. And they know that.
Oh, Illana.
Just trust. And this switching over of science as an absolute, you must pledge your allegiance, it's an ideology as opposed to a dynamic learning process that you must necessarily unroot yourself according to the data and the evidence in front of you. But we've lost that entirely. You're not allowed to question vaccines, even though there's a lot of reasons to look for improvements in them.
Yes. Tell me about your specific concerns with this new generation of, I'm not going to call them vaccines because they're not, they're jabs, aren't they? Tell me what your research has unearthed.
I mean, and again, and I want to say that I'm not, the whole argument of that I make personally, even before all this, is not about being a pro or anti. Everybody wants to make it, they say we talk in black and white, but we live in shades of gray. This is talking about improving on a product that we're mandating for every newborn child up until today. This is the discussion we must have. So everybody wants to stick you in a box, but that's not the box that I'm talking from. I'm talking about being against coercion. I'm talking about making the best use of science and technology that's available to us. So mRNA, and I'm not a scientist and I'm not a doctor, but mRNA has a history of they've never made it out of the stage 3 animal trials because all the animals, rabbits, cats, monkeys, ferrets, all drop dead of ADE, advanced cytokine storm, this pathogenic priming, which basically means it's sort of, they take the vaccine, everything seems okay, and then when they're introduced to the virus in the wild, then the body has a extreme inflammatory process, and generally they die. They've never tested this out on the public exactly for that reason. They know exactly what's going to happen.
Yes.
There's a great fear, like you said already, of fertility, the syncytin 1 and the similarities between the antibodies. We know that the concern about, autoimmune is literally the body not recognizing its own proteins, and we're literally adding this synthetic pathogenic part of the spike protein into the cellular system. We have no idea. And the fact that we're making a second-class citizen, literally in a medical apartheid, literally based on wishful thinking at best. We don't think. They're telling me that our point is anti-science when you literally have doctors saying, we don't think it will happen. Well, that's lovely, but you
Yes.
can't tell me there's enough science to base something on when we know that Corona only came into our lives a year ago. But yet this vaccine that was stuck in a vial within 8 weeks' time is enough to decide that we are anti-scientific and we can't associate with our communities anymore. It's a complete madness that's happened.
Yes, I understand that it's an experimental substance until 2023. So anyone who takes it now is in the experimental phase. And as you say, there is that massive worry about ADE. I just wanted to reference, I'm just going to look it up now, that this piece that was in new analysis, Pfizer vaccine killed about 40 times more elderly than the disease itself would have killed. It says a reanalysis of data from the Israeli Health Ministry concluded Pfizer's COVID vaccine killed about 40 times more elderly people than the disease itself would have killed during a recent 5-week vaccination period, and 260 times more younger people than would have died from the virus. Now that is just terrifying. It's at a website called Children's Health Defense, and these guys who've done this, reporter, Kosher. It's by a guy called Dr. Hervé Seligman, a member of the Faculty of Medicine, Emerging Infectious and Tropical Diseases at Aix-Marseille University, and engineer Haim Yativ. These are not fools. They've done their research, and this is just the beginning. I mean, we haven't even had the ADE effect yet. So we've already got excess mortality just from reactions to these jabs. And if these people encounter the wild virus, we know that there could be this weird antibody reaction where instead of protecting you from the virus, it actually exaggerates its effects. So I can see why you're reluctant to take it. Tell me, have you found kind of solidarity? Are there other people like you in Israel?
So there are. There's there are people speaking out more and more. How do I say this? There are, but Israel seems to have a unique situation where we don't see the sort of power of the people on the streets because of the nature of Israel, which I myself am trying to understand, where you have a population that's really been very uniquely dependent on the government, being this little island on itself. So the trust that's with the government is sort of stronger in a way than you have in some bigger countries. Yeah. You have a profound dependency on the government, as well as everybody goes to the army. This is not an army where you have these kind of stereotype of people. This is everybody's kids. They come home with their piles of laundry, and they, eat a ton of food, and they sleep for the weekend, and they go back. We're all the same. It's all the same population. So having people speak out has been we've seen it very differently than what we've seen in Europe. We've seen a couple thousands of people as opposed to the 10,000s you want to see rioting in the streets.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, you're sort of like a giant kibbutz, aren't you? Everyone's sort of pulling together, and everyone does their military service, and probably are used to taking orders, used to obeying orders, ultimately for the greater good of the state.
Well, also, our lives have depended on it. If somebody's attacking, is not such an unusual thing. You have to be able to depend on your government, who says, go into your basement or whatever it is. There's been a very necessary, we're literally existing in an island here, with a whole lot of. There's just been a very necessity for survival. But the data that you were talking about is it will still be coming up because, like I said, you have no real collection of the data. I wonder myself what Pfizer is getting out of it. Obviously they're the real data that I imagine that Pfizer wants to see, they're not even getting, because, like I said, there's nothing being collected, at least to my knowledge. I have contact with people inside medical centers here, and they see what they see. 40-year-olds, there's a lot of heart issues happening. Even in the VAERS, they saw that 40-something-year-old people dropping dead of heart attack a day or two later, but there's no connection. God forbid anybody who gets a shot to the head, and dies, he dies of corona. But anybody who's taken the vaccine and clearly has a catastrophic reaction, it's just absolutely coincidence every time.
Right.
So, and I hear some really gut-wrenching things that are happening inside our hospitals. These things can only happen if you have an army to soldiers to carry out your orders.
Oh my goodness. Tell me, oh yes, first of all, has there been any resistance from within Parliament at all? Has any of your MPs or anyone?
Nothing. No, well, that's not fair to say. There's been a few lone voices of sanity, and there was one woman, Sasha, they immediately took her out of the Corona Committee. We also have they put in a 30-year confidentiality act, We can't know anything. Not only are they doing the most extreme policy implementation of anywhere on the planet, we don't even have a clue what they're saying in there. 30 years, no idea.
That is, oh my goodness.
It is, oh my goodness.
Whoa.
Yeah. And you have almost no, and that's literally, talking about politics, which is a dirty word. It's a dirty word in my mouth. I personally have done a fantastic job of avoiding politics my whole life because it's the house of lies. It's temporary.
Yeah,
it never interests me based on, and so the fact that I have joined this party literally only because it is solely a human rights movement. Yeah. This is not right or left. Everybody keeps saying, well, what do you think about this? I'm just like, this is the house is on fire. We'll talk about rearranging the furniture some other time. We only want to get into the health ministry. We only talk about transparent science. We only talk about no more lockdowns, no insane green passport, no forced anything. Even vitamin D, vitamin D can mean the meaning of life or death, your vitamin D levels. But I'm not going to force my Israeli beloved citizens to take vitamin D because I'm just going to give them the information that they could have some responsibility for their own health, to make these kinds of information ubiquitous the way every little sign on the door is, put your mask on, how about some actual information of how to prepare your body to ring?
Are there not any kind of sort of cantankerous, contrarian, old school Israeli journalists or writers or anybody or sort of media figures who are pointing this out, or are you all alone?
Well, there are, I'm starting to connect. I think the biggest challenge is, especially in Israel, that's why I'm also so, but we're starting to make the connections because you have little groups 2 and 4 and 8 and 10, so I think finally now it's as far as the journalists, that I haven't seen. Although, in all honesty, I don't get my news from the mainstream media, So, but people are starting more and more to talk. The protests are finally gaining some strength, and that's why it really is crucial. They've cut off. You can't say a word about it in the media. You cannot suggest that this is not the most fantastic thing, but it's complete. It's people who are beloved in the media before saying, hey guys, can you mandate something that has death as a side effect? And they're, off with his head completely. So, yeah, but it's happening. I had a call this morning. So it's happening. I think that it's very powerful. For the first time, reaching out to the international community for me I feel hope in a way that I haven't, because this is how we win. There's some people who say, oh, the sheep. And I can't think like that, because the only way so far that I've come up with to overcome these incredibly powerful forces is if all the people stand up. That's what they want. That's why they're separating us. We are the many and they are the few. But if we get together, really, from the inside and out, they can't stop us. We're in charge.
I totally agree. And what the situation you describe about the media is exactly the same in the UK, and I think in the US probably too. But there is not a single newspaper that is arguing against this craziness. And even one of our leading tabloid newspapers at the weekend, the Mail on Sunday, had a 4-page spread telling its readers, who include people like my mother, telling them that these vaccines, as they call them, were absolutely safe, and just ramming home the message, and also ramming home the propaganda line that people who didn't like the vaccine were anti-vaxxers, conspiracy theorists, this kind of thing. So they both bigged up the vaccine while simultaneously vilifying anyone who opposed it, making them pariahs. Now, you tell me a bit more about the pariah status of people who won't take the vaccine. So you can't go into museums. I've seen the photographs of those deck chairs on the beach where it said you can only sit here if you've had a vaccine. So give me a few other examples.
That's it. I get calls from people. I can't go to the choir, my choir that I've been a part of for 6 years.
That's
I can't
awful.
do you can't go to the choir. I can't join my pool. They won't even give me my money back for my membership to the pool that they won't let me in anymore.
Wait,
We're allowed
a
still.
pool with
Yeah.
loads of chlorine in the water where you couldn't possibly catch this.
Exactly. Exactly. You can't get into your pools, in the gyms. They've kind of made it so I think so they were put malls on the table to keep us out of, and maybe only some are adhering and some aren't. You have some businesses. It's still playing out because again, it's all there's no science here that this is based on. So it's all willy-nilly, but it changes every day. This morning, they're going to not let you in here. But what's happening actually is on a terrifying level at the airports. Just this morning, there was a man who wrote up his personal experience coming into the airport and his mother having been a survivor from Auschwitz. And he literally felt like he was in a selection. It was literally, did you have the vaccine or have you recovered from the virus? Go to the right. And if you haven't, you go to the left, you get this thing jammed up your nose, and they ship you off to these filthy Corona hotels. You're like a prisoner in your own state. I saw even or you can use, or I think in some cases, again, I can't be completely specific because it changes from minute to minute, or they give you this security ankle bracelet, which you get to pay the privilege of having, being a prisoner in your own home, 2,000 shekels per leg, to be monitored in your own home. And if you don't, and it's quite a physical, there's been some tussles at the airport, women and children, and it's insane.
Oh
It's
my
insane.
goodness. Yeah.
Stuck in these filthy hotels. The truth is, and I heard even from Canada that Trudeau also said some pretty crazy things as well about anybody coming in internationally and what they'll do. So whether that may not be unique, it's absolutely being implemented as we speak.
Yes.
Yeah. And also as well. So in the schools, they're rolling out these programs where if you want to participate in your schools, you have to get this swab. And if one kid tests positive, the whole class is out. It's mad. It's people who are not, they're pushing you to the extreme. So people who even wouldn't question vaccines before are saying this is so, it's so extreme that it's suspicious. It's
suspicious. More than suspicious. Yeah. I mean, if COVID was such a problem, people would be, if you were in serious risk of dying from COVID, which most of us really aren't, they wouldn't need to empower the state to do all this stuff to you. That you'd be queuing up anyway. So, how did the people in your choir group react? I mean, do they miss you? Have you had conversations with them?
This was a friend of mine. I'm not in a choir group, but it was a friend of mine who literally was crying to me. They thinking this one bit of joy that she had. They just simply, how people are justifying this. It's still the whole thing. It's still that people are still sending me the same kind of pictures. Of people crowding together. Do you think this is right? It's still this blindness, as if Corona is the reason behind it. And with those kind of people, there's not enough. If you're still in that shroud, I think that this is not sort of the energy that I've got the time right this minute to focus on. It's sort of the people who are sitting at home going, something doesn't feel right, and let's bring articulation to that, to what you're seeing, what you're feeling. Those are the people that right now need to join this movement. People who still imagine that this is all about a virus that we could have solved in March with ubiquitous treatments that have been in use since the 1970s. It's this whole idea, which I think that if you're asking people, it's a very linear sort of answer to get to the point where our governments know that there's treatments that there's treatments that we know that work that have been denied us, in order to be able to, you can't have an experimental treatment if you have treatments that work. So this emergency authorized treatment is absolutely, we have been denied the things that could have saved thousands upon thousands of lives. Yeah. Vitamin D, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. We've been denied those quite deliberately. Yeah. And if you ask those questions, then it tears the whole structure down. And I think it's too painful. People have lost so much this year. It's like, some people just, they can't go any further in asking those questions. Yeah. It's just taking too much. You know, we've all been good. We invested decades into this whole structure of society. It's just asking too much of some people to go there.
Now, before I forget, I was going to mention this earlier. Have you seen the charts of the deaths in the Palestinian territories compared with the Israel?
Much less.
Yeah, much less, because, you know, the Palestinians have not been given these so-called vaccines, and if you believe the narrative, you'd think, well, this is Israel denying the poor Palestinians their lifesaver. But actually, those Palestinians are very, very lucky, because they're not dying on anything like the same scale. The spike for deaths in Israel to do with the vaccine is shocking. And there's not, yeah. I mean, if ever you wanted an experiment where you've got these contiguous territories, contiguous populations, very, very, very similar in many ways, you know, climate and so on, and yet they're not dying. The Palestinians are not dying. The Israelis are. That's shocking. I imagine that this is not something you're gonna see in what are your papers, Haaretz or whatever.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Also,
lockdowns as well.
Sorry?
Countries who never locked down, countries that have never locked down, not one day. Japan, nobody even talks about Japan, right next to China. Yeah, right over there. Never a day shut down, never a forced anything. You know, we in Israel have sat in a cumulative 5 months of lockdown. 5 months we have been locked in our houses in the past year.
Have you?
Yeah. Yes.
What's that been like? Are you allowed out to take exercise? How does it work?
So it's changed, because of course everything changes. So the first one, the very first one, you remember the good days back at the first lockdown? Yes. That was only 100 meters we were allowed from our house. 100 meters. Yeah. And 100 meters, 1,000 meters. We had to be tethered to the house, and it was very, very extreme. We could only go to the grocery store. It was something, and then the previous ones, then they kind of come up and down, and they've messed around with it. They have jerked everybody around to the point that they've lost their minds. You go to school, you tell children they can go to school, and by the next morning, no, we've changed our minds. You can't. Green zones, red zones. It's so, we say Israel Belagan. It's a mess. It's a massive mess. So the last one, the third one, which we're still in, I don't even know. We're still in it. We're not in it. And again, you could only go 1,000 meters from your house. And then they finally loosened it so you could do exercise. You can only take your mask off now. You can take it off if you're doing exercise. I'm always doing exercise. Yeah, I've always got my sneakers on wherever I'm going now. But yeah, it's insane. You can't do anything. Who's essential? Who's not essential? You have people who since October, I know a guy who says I'm still in second lockdown. He has a coffee house in Tel Aviv, and they've never opened him since October. Anyway,
yeah. It's extraordinary. They're just trying to kill your whole society and your whole culture. So what are you going to do? I mean, can you escape? I mean, do you want to escape? What future do you see in this tyranny? Because that's what it is.
That's a really hard question, because I've never, in the nearly 24 years that I've lived here, never considered leaving. Listen, I can't go anywhere else, because this is my home in a way I can't express it on a personal, my life experience level, and also as a Jew, you're plugged in here. This is where I'm meant to be. This is where I can best do whatever work in the world. There is nowhere else to go. Yeah. And if there was, I mean, apparently Florida is the only place left in the world to go. They're living lives normally there, but I can't leave. This is our fight. think ahead. It's like everything is completely opaque. You know, I have no idea. I think all of us in the world, we don't have any idea what the future is going to hold. So it's like you have this little candle and you just like one step forward, one step forward. All I know is all I can do is fight with everything I can, and I'll see what happens. That's all I can do.
Illana, I totally respect your spirit.